Have you ever had one of those moments when someone goes fishing with you and smashes an absolute donkey? Well, this just happened to me and my brother. He fishes maybe 5 times a year and comes out and nails a 21.75 inch bass, 5.6 pounds. And it had me in kind of one of those shaking my head moments. Now, the Wacky Rigged Senko is as simple as it gets. Simply take a hook right here, as you can see it. Take a 5-inch stick worm. You can get these at Walmart, maybe even a 4-inch stick worm. And then what you do is you take the hook and you run it through the center of the worm, just to the center of the cotylum of that worm. And I like it right there because it balances really well. And there you have right there, folks, the Wacky Rigged Senko. Now, my favorite colors is going to be, if you have clear water, is going to be that green pumpkin black fleck. I also use green pumpkin red fleck. This is a color that nailed that 5-pound 6-ounce bass that my brother just caught. Now, if you're fishing muddier water, I would lean into that black and blue. Those darker colors is going to create a better contrast in the water, and those bass are going to have an easier time seeing it. A hook size, you can use a size 1/1/0, maybe even a 2/0, depending on the hook that you got, and it's going to be around that size, maybe a little bit bigger. Now, something to take into consideration, not all hooks are created equally, so you want to look at the wire gauge. And the reason I say this, because I actually bought a 6th Sense Wacky Rig hooks before, and they were really thin, and I caught a really nice bass and actually bent out on me. So something to take into consideration when you're looking and buying your hooks. You want something that's not super thick, but also not super thin. Also, and I say this when I talk to everyone about hooks, don't cheap out on your hooks. You have thousands of dollars a lot of times in your rods, your reels, your boats. Don't cheap out on a 50-cent to $1 hook. Buy the nice ones, so when you do catch that fish of a lifetime, you don't lose it. So let's talk about the rod and reel setup. You can use a spinning reel setup. This is going to be a medium power, fast action spinning rod. Or, and I just started messing around with this. I didn't bring it. Here it is. You can fish a Wacky Rig on this guy right here. This is a BFS, bait finesse system. If you want to fish those Wacky Rigs, those Ned rigs, this is a Cast King Kestrel. I'll throw the link in the description below. I've been using it for the last couple weeks, and I like it. It's really nice. And so you can cast that Wacky Rig, that Ned rig, really far on a bait casting BFS reel. When it comes to the line, I am actually using on this 10-pound braid, and I am tying it off to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. You can use 8-pound fluorocarbon straight if you wanted to. A lot of times that will give you issues in your spinning rod. It'll happen to billow up and get caught in your first guide. It's super frustrating. So in order to cut down on that, you can run a braided main line, tie it to a fluorocarbon leader, and I like doing this with an Albright knot. I will share the link to how to tie that Albright knot and 2 other knots that you should know as a angler as well. So I'll throw that, actually I'll link that in the first comment below. All right, so what happens when you fish the Wacky Rig a lot of the times? If you're putting it straight through the worm, depending on the worm, either it'll stay there for a long time, or after a few casts or maybe a catch, it will rip off. So if you have the cheaper Yum Dingers, that's what this is right here, you might be able to last, like my brother caught 12 or 13 fish on one worm. If you buy the more expensive worms, like the Yamamoto Senkos, they're going to have a high salt content. And when you have that high salt content, the reason that you have that is because salt is more dense than water, and it actually falls through the water at a faster rate. And it's going to create that flutter that bass simply cannot resist. And so that's why those worms are 80 cents a piece, and that's why the Yum Dingers are 20 cents a piece. Can you catch bass on both of them? Yes, I have been fishing both of them, and I actually use Yum Dingers for certain scenarios, but if I'm tournament fishing, if I want to catch more fish, I'm definitely going to be using the Yamamoto Senkos. And so what happens is, with the Yum Dingers, I don't do any modifications. I just run it straight through the worm. If you want your worms to last longer, there's a variety of different options here. You can connect it through O-rings. So it's a tool that you run it through and basically roll the O-ring up, and you put the hook around the O-ring. Now, if you put a O-ring on, and this might not be a big deal for some people, but it's going to run, it's going to look like that, right? And I don't like my hook when it's parallel with the worm. I like it when it's horizontal to the worm like that. And so in order to get that with O-rings, you have to put 2 O-rings on, cross the O-rings, and run the hook through the X of the O-rings, and it's gonna make your worm last a very long time. If you don't have O-rings, you're going fishing today and you want your worms to last longer, you can put a piece of electrical tape and run it through there. Or if you have more time or don't want that black line going through your worm, you can buy the clear shrink tubing and kind of melt that on and make it shrink down to your worm and run the hook through that as well, and that's going to prolong the life of your lure. And to be honest with you, it's got to keep a lot of these worms out of the lakes that we love to fish. And actually, and I've used these, they're really great. VMC makes a Wacky Rig harness that is awesome as well. I believe they are called the VMC crossover rings. So I'll throw a link to everything I had shared in the description below. All right, so now let's get a little bit tactical. So what I'll do when you're casting the Wacky Worm out, simply throw it out. And then when it hits the water, you're gonna let that sit for maybe 3 to 5 seconds. And what it's doing, and it's fluttering down in the water, and a lot of times the bass will actually nail it on that fall. If they don't nail it on the fall, what I like to do is tug up to 5 times. So you go tug, tug, pause, let it flutter again. Tug, tug, pause, let it flutter again. I do this 4 to 5 times. And then after 4 to 5 times, I just reel it in. And don't go running to the comments. I've had a ton of people run the comments, be like, oh, Daren, I catch them at the boat all the time. I'm sure you do. What I'm saying is I've fished this lure tens of thousands of times. If you don't catch a bass within the first 5 tugs, it's going to be beneficial to you to reel that in as fast as you can and target another area. You are going to catch more fish and bigger fish this way than you would if you continue to tug that another 15 times back to the boat. Your chances of catching fish aren't nil, but they definitely go down after 4 to 5 tugs. So use this more as a target strategy. Another thing you want to do, especially if you're using braid to fish the Wacky Worm, I don't recommend this because braid floats and you want that Wacky Worm to sink. But if you are using braid, make sure you watch your line, because that might be the first indicator that you have a bass before you actually feel it. Also, don't jump the gun on that hook set. Make sure you feel your rod load up before you set the hook, and then a nice sweeping hook set is going to do the trick for you using this type of hook and this type of technique. So where I'm going to be fishing this is, I'm typically not going to be fishing this in deeper water. I'm going to be fishing this in 6 feet of water or less. The only time that I'm fishing this in deeper water is if I see bass blowing up, or if I'm doing a follow-up cast. Maybe I was fishing a different lure, they missed it, I'll quickly grab my Wacky Rigged Worm and throw it out there, and a lot of times that will pick up that secondary bite. So the Wacky Worm, it just gets bit, period. Now, especially if you're a beginner learning bass fishing, this is the #1 lure I recommend, because you are going to get a lot of bass really fast, and you might get lucky like my brother and pick up that personal best donkey. Oh man, it's about to rain. I'm about to get hit to the storm here. I got to finish up this video. All right, so the worms that get my money, and I mentioned this a little earlier in the video, is going to be the Yum Dingers. You can buy these. I buy them by the 100 pack. You can get, especially sometimes you're following Amazon, they run deals on these. Sometimes you can get 100 of them for like $22, but usually they're $28. Now, if you want to get the more expensive lures, you can hop into the Yamamoto Senkos. You can buy those for a pack of 100 for like 80 bucks. I don't think you can get those on Amazon right now. You're going to have to go over to like Fishing Warehouse or some other place to pick up the 100 packs. And I like them both, because sometimes I might not want that lure and that worm to fall really fast. Say I'm fishing really, really shallow and I want that to stay in a certain strike zone longer, I will throw the Yum Dinger. If I want it to fall really fast, say I'm skipping it under the dock, I'll pick up the Yamamoto Senkos. So if my brother can pick up his personal best bass with fishing 5 times a year, I think you're gonna have luck on this as well. Now, if you're just getting into fishing and you want to learn more bass fishing lures, I break them down just like I did this one. If you're fishing the Senko and having luck on it, you're also going to want to try out the Texas rig. Check that out right there. And also the chatterbait bladed jig. Check out that video right there. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to put my rain jacket on. It is going to start pouring.
I think I got caught in a rainstorm.